Hello, all. This is Hiley. Just wanted to let you know that the long awaited launch of the paperback edition of 7 Ways to Beat the Repo-Man, How to Save Your Car, Save Your Credit, and Make Some Money is almost here. The launch day, it will become available for sale on Friday, April 4th. But first, I wanted to thank everyone that submitted survey questions about the book from my previous announcement. Just so you know, it's not a long survey. It really is me asking one question, which is to ask you guys what are the top two topics or issues or bits of information that you definitely would want to see in this book. So it's really not a long survey. So I would ask that any of you guys who haven't clicked on the link and gone to fill out the survey or pre-order, register for pre-order of the book, I would ask that you please do that for me. It's nothing. It's just filling out a short little form and just asking me 2 questions. It's not a long survey. So if you could please do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. I could really use that feedback. But first, I want to remind you guys that may not know how I got to here. Um, and many of you have already heard the story. I back in September of 2022 through the end of the year 2022, I must have talked to 27 or 28 people who had collections on their credit reports related to repossessions. Most of them were involuntary, but most of the people said, "Oh yeah, that shouldn't read that way. It should be voluntary because I gave the car back." And I said, "What do you mean?" So many of them went on to say that for various reasons, they decided they didn't want the car anymore, or they were giving up the car and decided they didn't want to pay the note on it anymore. So they thought if they just dropped the car off or just left a note with the lender or something, and just says, "Hey, here's the car, come get it," that suddenly just relieved them of the loan. And so of course, in those individual conversations, I explained to them that that's not the proper way to surrender a car in a voluntary repossession. And so this whole notion of giving the car back and thinking that the loan is null and void is just a misconception I wanted to set straight, because so many people had their credit wrecked because of that misunderstanding. And so after explaining that to them, I said, "Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to put out a video." So I created a video just talking about 8 ways to avoid a repossession. And I went on to explain to them the difference between voluntary and involuntary, and the proper way to do a voluntary repossession, and the proper way and then ways to avoid a repossession at all. And it was broken down into three different ways. Basically, if you wanted to keep your car and you're having trouble with the payments, there's ways to address that. If it's an issue with a loss of income, or if it's an issue with moving your payment around for your budget reasons. And then there's if you were someone who needed to make money to pay the car on top of your salary through a loss of income, there's some strategies there to how to make money. And then if you've decided that I don't want this car anymore, and so then there's a section on the proper way to get rid of the car, whether it's through a sale, whether it's through a voluntary repossession. And so, but basically it's to show you that you have options if you're having struggles with your car payment and with your car, period. That is the purpose of this book. It's to show you that you do have options. It's to show you that you also have choices, because um, usually you have multiple different approaches to how you want to do it, depending on what you want your outcome to be. But more important, this book puts many of those choices in one place in this book so that you can easily weigh your options and see which one will give you the best outcome, or in some cases, the least worst outcome. Because the hope is that you can get out of the car without paying anything, but sometimes that may not be possible. But if you can at least reduce the amount and have control over the outcome on that, you'll usually find yourself saving a lot of money, having a less of a negative impact on your credit. And then again, if you really want to, you possibly turn it around. It's worked for people. Now, but the ultimate goal is, in that least worst outcome, is that it's going to give you ways to get out of this bad situation that you might find yourself in and allow you to get past it and move on to bigger and better things. Ultimately, this book, I wrote this book, and in this book, I want to show you how to do what worked for others, because these are things that worked for other people in the same or similar situation that you might be in, and that it could work for you too. To show you how to create a fun and lucrative side hustle, um, and may possibly grow into a small business. And there are folks, none of the people that were led there by me, but other folks who have used some of these techniques that have gone on to grow businesses out of them. And also to show you how to save money by showing you how to properly surrender a car, and so that you can avoid unnecessary fees and costs, and of course, impact to your credit, which ultimately you would have to spend time and energy fixing that later. So that's what my goal is with this book. Now, to let you know a little bit about what's in the book and how it could possibly help you, I'm going to talk about a couple of quick case studies. Now, this first one is called Dodging the Tow Truck: How to Tweak Your Loan and Keep Your Ride. Okay, I had a client of mine, his name was Fred, but that's not his real name, but I didn't use people's real names in the book. Fred had purchased his pickup truck back in 2023, and he had an auto loan from a local bank. Now, he had financed the truck at $25,000. His interest rate was like 6.5. He had a 60-month loan, 5 years. His payment was about $490. Now, due to some economic downturn after the pandemic, he had experienced a reduction in his work hours. And then on top of that, he had some increased medical bills because he had contracted COVID, and he didn't have a significant hospital stay. He had a small pay, but it kept him out of work, even though he was able to go back to work because his job was an essential job. But he couldn't work because of his having COVID, and then afterwards. So because of all that, Fred did fall behind on his car payments. At the time, he had missed 3 consecutive payments and was at risk of repossession. They had sent him his notice saying he was almost ready for default. And because of the lates, Fred's scores had dropped from approximately 720 to around 620, 625 due to late payments. And so he contacted me because he was looking to fix his credit. Now, initially, he was thinking about buying a house, but he had put that on hold, but he still wanted to have his credit fixed. So in his initial contact with me, I had advised Fred to contact the lender to tell them and let him know about his financial difficulties. I assured Fred that in light of what was going on with the pandemic, this was not an oddball conversation. They were already prepared for people like that. He had already discussed this with others who were in similar situations due to hardships from COVID. But I told him, and I reminded him, as I remind all clients, always contact your lender and let them know what's going on. They're your partners in lending, so you want to let them know what's going on. Believe me, it's not a case of them not caring. They do care, and they do want to help you because they don't want the loan to default, because when the loan defaults, it loses value because a delinquent loan is not worth as much as a loan from an paper client. That I was just checking my microphone, and let them know. So the paper client that keeps the value on that loan. So I told him to contact them and see what they could do to help him with the payment and explore any options that they may be available to avoid his repossession. Now, with some assistance from the loan officer, the service person who then transferred him to a loan officer, Fred was able to do the following. He went through the loan modification process. So in that process, first thing they did was an assessment of his financial situation. So Fred had provided detailed information about his current situation, including his income, expenses, and his outstanding debts besides the car loan. The loan officer reviewed all of Fred's payment history and his final documents because Fred had a stellar payment history before the pandemic situation and the reduction in pay and then his illness. And so he provided additional financial documents such as his pay stubs, bank statements, and the medical bills related to his COVID illness. And so what happened was the loan officer proposed to Fred a loan modification. Now, a loan modification is basically a temporary reduction to his monthly payments for a limited amount of time, and that'll allow him to work through, get back to work, and be able to get back on his regular schedule. That difference in payments from what his regular payment is to the modified payment was lumped together and would be added to the balance of the loan on what we call the back end. And so the loan officer proposed that to Fred, and he did that to make his payments more manageable and thus um, avoiding that. In addition to the modified loan difference, they also put on the back end the past due payments. And so that would stop him from continuing to have late payments beyond that. Now, some of the key elements of this modification proposal are it extended his loan term. So at the time when he got it, he was about 9 or 10 months, I think if I remember correctly, into the original loan when he went delinquent. And so they did a modification. So they extended his loan amount. So they changed it from a 5-year loan. Actually, this one, I was thinking it was a temporary one, but now that I think about it, it was a permanent modification. So they rewrote his loan. They extended him from the original 60 months to 72 months. So to stretch the term out and lower the payment. And they also, because his credit, through a special program, they temporarily, now that part is temporary. The extension of the loan was permanent. They temporarily reduced his interest rate from 6.5% to 5%, and then they would bring it back up to 6.5%. And then they rolled the 3 missed payments of $1,470 something. They added that on to the balance, and they basically gave him a new loan term. And so his new balance ended up being 26,000 and change. His new rate was 5 temporarily. And so that temporarily brought his payment down to 426 from the original 490. But they I'm sorry, not 426, 406. 406. So they were able to do that. So it wasn't as significant, but it was enough to make a difference. And he got rid of the past due payments because he didn't have the money for that. So with the implementation of that, basically when the modification was finalized, the new terms started immediately, and Fred started making the monthly payments of 426. And so because the missed payments were added onto the balance, they were no longer considered delinquent, and Fred avoided repossession with a small but important reduction in his monthly payment. And so that was the beginning, and that held that off. And so all he had to do was continue that, and then eventually those delinquent payments that brought his score down aged away, and then his score began to rise again with the new payment history going forward. Now, in ongoing support of that file, the loan officer had advised Fred during that time, because this was a couple of years ago. This was about a year and a half ago, and the loan officer had advised Fred to stay in touch with the bank if he had any other difficulties, like if he wasn't able to recover, if the payment revert, the payment, if there are any other issues, he wouldn't fall back into default. Okay. And then in addition to that, Fred hired me to help him with his credit. In addition to the credit consultant I had advised him on some additional financial and credit coaching services to help him work a new budget based on that, because his original budget was always based on that built-in overtime that his job had available. And so he needed to make the changes to adjust to having a budget based on his base pay. And so we did that. Now, ultimately, the outcome for Fred was the loan modification allowed him to keep his car, avoiding repossession, lowered his payment by about $64, which made a big difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it did. And it reduced the negative impact to his credit score by eliminating the late payments on his credit. In addition to that, they actually, as a good faith effort, they removed one of the lates, and so they rolled it back. So according to his credit history, the worst he ever had was 60-day late. He never had a 90-day late. That gave him a little bit bump back to his score, just modifying that. Now with the reduced payment, Fred was able to focus on stabilizing his financial situation and address his medical bills. And then as of the printing of the book, when I first finished the book last year, all but one of his previous late car payments were not reporting. Only one was left reporting, but now it has since gone, I'm pretty sure, because Fred's no longer my client. He didn't need me anymore, but I'm pretty sure that he went back to his previous routine. And now the last, when I looked at it back in the fall, he was back up in the 700 range, about 720 plus, 712 plus or minus on each of his three scores. So the late payments were no longer impacting his score because he had managed to make 12 payments after that default, after that delinquency, and let those age out. Now, so that's a key when you're talking about modification. Now I'm going to tell you about another client of mine's who, and this one I call let your car pay the bills, how to pimp your ride legally with car sharing. Now this one's about a client named Angela. Angela had purchased her new car. It's not 10 months. It's 10 months as of the publishing of the book. So it's been almost 18 months. No, it's been over 18 months now. So 18 months ago, she had purchased her new car, but she fell behind 2 months on her loan payment due to a loss of overtime at work. Nothing to do with COVID or anything. This was 18 months ago, but it was basically a work reduction. Now, she was at risk of repossession at the time if she didn't catch up on her payments. So her goal was she wanted to try to generate extra income and cover her monthly payment without having to reduce anything else in her budget. So she wanted to make just enough money just to cover the car payment. And she wasn't really keen on trying to work a second job. So she said, so I suggested to her some alternate ways of making money. And I listed several things. And out of what I told her, she decided to list her car for with a car sharing service. She used Turo by creating a profile, and she created some nice photos and details, and then she set up a profile on Turo's platform. Turo is a car share platform. Think of it as sort of like Airbnb for cars. So you sign up and you put your car in there and you say, my car is available. You tell them what you have in mind as the cost that you want to rent the car for. The platform, they vet out all of the people who want to rent cars. So they do all the background checks and all the legal stuff so that that somebody fairly honest is going to be renting your car. And then the way it works is So you do some research. Step one, you do research. So you research on their platform and other places how much that similar cars to hers would be rented in the area. She had a Kia Optima, and so that's what she wanted to earn money to make that payment. Then she found that cars like hers were renting for between $50 and $75 a day. But you could also rent for half days too. You have that option. So four to 12 hour increments you can do. And so she decided to create a profile and add that detailed description to attract renters to the site. Because I always tell it's always good to know so that if you don't want to overprice and then not get takers, and you don't want to have it underpriced and lose out on money. Step two, you want to set rental availability. Again, all this is done in the website, in the platform, in this case, Turo. She went in and she set an availability for her car during the week, and so that she didn't need it. So she she would rent. She tried renting it out while she's at work, and then she could set it up where people could just, anybody wanted to rent the car, all they had to do was come to her job and get the key, which they knew what the key was, and from the parking lot of her job, and then they would return it before her shift was over. And so that's what she did. Now she set it out. She originally listed it for 15 days per month, figuring if she set it up for 15, if she rented it out at least 10, 9 or 10 days a month, that was more than enough to cover her $500 car payment. Third step was was managing the rental. The platform helps you a lot with that. So over the next few weeks after she signed it up, she did receive many bookings requests for a car. She ended up renting it out 12 days that first month. She rented it 12 days. She earned a little bit over $600, after the fees that it costs for you using the platform. After they get their cut, she received about a little bit over $600, if I remember correctly, and that was more than enough to cover her $500 payments. And she even had a little extra money to go towards her payment or use for whatever. So then she, with the $600 she earned, she was able to make her car payment on time. And she even had made the little extra money. That first $100, she used that to pay the late fee from the previous month, because she was just really starting to get behind, and so she was at 60 days, so she was able to catch up that way using Turo to do that. Okay, now back when I released the book, back in the summer, she was continuing to use Turo to rent her car, and she was kind of happy with it, and she planned to do it. I haven't talked to her in months, so I'm not sure if she's still using Turo, but I know she was pretty happy about the money after she got over the initial kind of nervousness about strange people driving her car. But she has not had any bad experiences. So for her implementation and car outcome, she basically leveraged the car sharing platform of Turo. She had successfully avoided repossession, and now she's generating extra income. At least she was. But no matter how long, it gave her time to get back on her feet financially. And then even more so, again, as of last summer, her sister Ann, she was really excited by it when she saw how Angela was making that money to pay her payment and a little extra. So Ann, she joined Turo and rented her car out, and she was really happy with that and starting to get really, really used to that, to the point where she decided her and Angela pitched in together and bought another car and use that car for full-time Turo only, and they're happy with that. So I don't know with that, if they're still using their own cars, but they certainly have that option. So that was a way for them to make money. And really, if they want to, I've seen entrepreneurs who have used Turo to build up a fleet and have basically their own rental car company, and they're buying cars. Now, these ladies could more than certainly do that if they wanted to really scale it up like that. That's the beauty of it, is because it's a side hustle. It's a side hustle, and it can also be scaled up into a business, and you don't have to spend your time. I mean, Uber and Lyft is great, but you don't have to put in that time yourself. You let them, you become your own little rental car company. So those are two examples of what transformation you could get by buying this book and implementing the strategies in there. So if you're having trouble with your car payment, there's opportunities there to change the payment or change the amount of money you make. And again, with this, it's even an opportunity to earn some money. So in my next video, I'll tell you a little bit more about the transformation and how the strategies in this book can make things better for you, and even talk a little bit about if you're one of those folks who have a car and you just say, I don't want it anymore, I don't want to pay for it anymore. And then I'll explain to you how you can properly get rid of that car, and you may even make some money there too if you do it right. So I'm going to ask again, please click the link below to answer a crucial question for me, or to register the book. And so until the next video, which will be tomorrow, I hope you guys are ready for the launch. And I think for those who are buying the book just to support me, you may not necessarily have a need for any of that. Although that make money thing, anybody can benefit from that, whether you're doing a repo or not. Or if you decide you want an extra car, but you don't want to have two car notes, this is a way you can make the car pay for itself and make some money for you. But again, I'll talk about that in the next video, and I'll talk a little bit more about the offer on the book itself. And so until then, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I appreciate all your support and all your help. Talk to you soon. Bye.